Techniques of andragogy: learning contracts, interviews, joint goal setting, group discussions, and problem solving. Learning contracts can be on a one-to-one. Maybe the student needs a little bit of I don't know, goal setting. You know, where is this person going? And the teacher can sit down with that student and say, okay, let's figure out where we need to go. What is it that we can use to help you learn? Interviews. What a way to get somebody's perspective and experiences by listening and interviewing others with appropriate questions. You know, those open-ended questions, intrigue, curiosity. Joint goal setting. Where are we going? Are we all going in the same direction? Because if we are, we can learn from one another. Helps us keep us going, motivation. Group discussions. Pooling our resources and figuring out what it is that each of us can bring. How can we solve a problem? Problem solving through group discussions. Wonderful way to learn. Pooling our experience. Understanding the other perspective. No. Heavy stuff. We can definitely learn from one another. Okay, compare and contrast in looking at andragogy versus pedagogy. The learner versus teacher. The learner. It's about the student. The student, it brings information. They have this lived experience. They want to understand. They need to know why. So you have to look at the learner. What is it the student needs? What is the student bringing to the classroom? When it comes to the teacher, apparently the teacher thinks they're the only one who knows anything, because they stand up on that pedestal, they dictate. They don't want to know about your experience. You will learn. I know, you will learn. That's it. Informal versus formal. It could be on the informal side of for andragogy is first name basis. It kind of levels the playing field, bridges the gap, makes things, you know, a little bit more friendlier, a little bit more respectful. On the formal side, nothing but first name basis. That is it. You will call me Mrs. Jones, and never the twain shall meet. Trust in relationships versus low trust. Well, I know one thing. In the andragogy classroom, I will not need a hall pass to go to the bathroom. As with the low trust, you will need a hall pass, because I'm not going to trust you. Collaborative versus judgmental. Judgmental is quick to discipline, punitive. If you don't do this, I'm going to give you homework, or even more homework. You're not going to get no time off. Whereas the collaborative is that we've talked. You know, if you're going to be late for class, you call the teacher up and say, I'm going to be a little late. You're not going to get detention. Not in the adult learning environment, you're not. You'll probably give the teacher detention. Well, maybe not. So what do you believe to be the differences from how you learned as a child and how you learn now? Well, for me, and give myself as a little bit of an experience here, when I was in school, I didn't have anything to draw from. I had no foundation, any experience. I was still learning my life. I was still learning my social roles within my home and how to interact with others outside the home. Questions? I didn't have any. I was afraid to talk. I was afraid of being wrong. I didn't want to be disciplined. I didn't want to be 15, 20, 30 minutes of detention and miss the bus home. I didn't want to get ridiculed in class. I didn't want to become involved in anything in the classroom. I wanted to become the wallflower because I didn't want anybody to think I was stupid. Now, I'm eager to learn. I'm not afraid to learn. I'm not afraid to take that risk. I'm not afraid to put my hand up and say why and challenge the teacher. Maybe I'm more self-assured. Maybe as a child, is you still kind of walking the underconfidence line. As an adult, we become more confident of who we are. As a child, you're still trying to find out who you are. So maybe that's something that we can see what the differences are. Present day applications. But first, I start on this. I did mention earlier on about the assumptions of pedagogy, and we've basically touched on them through this discussion. Is dependent personality. We'd already talked about that versus independent. Subject-centered learning, it's all about the subject, there's nothing about the learner at all. External motivation, we talked about that. You will get extra homework if you don't do what I tell you to do. And the experience is not valid. I don't care what you know. It's all about me, the teacher. It's what I know. But looking at present day applications of the adult learning theory, self-directed learning. This is where the students, they take initiative for their own learning. They develop goals, identify resources, implement appropriate activities, and evaluate the outcomes. And you think, oh, what are you talking about? Well, we just think a little bit. Identify resources. Implement appropriate activities. We know where we're going. And I can give you an idea. When I was in nursing school, we were talking about where there was a class on IV fluids and osmosis. I didn't know anything about this subject, so I couldn't contribute. But I knew when I was confused. The teacher was confused herself. I think this must have been a new class for her. And I just thought, I can't take this no more. She's just totally confusing me. She was going back and forth. I thought, that's it, I can't listen no more. And I stopped listening, stopped learning from her. So I needed to develop a goal. My goal was to learn about this subject. It was important for me as a nurse, or when I became a nurse, to understand the IV fluids, the concentrations, and what it meant to the cells of the body when it comes to osmosis. So I identified my resources. I knew that I had the textbook, that's what we had, and I knew that there was a test in there to evaluate my outcome. So I had my resources. So to implement appropriate activities, I went home, I got that one chapter on IV fluids and electrolytes. I read it, and I gained understanding. Actually, I even made out some 3x5 cards just to reinforce parts of it that I may not have understood. And I evaluated the outcomes by taking the test at the end, and I passed that. So I did all those 4 components of self-directed learning, and I passed the class. That was good. Today, some students actually even pick their own clinical rotation and assignments because they are able to identify their weaknesses maybe more than what the educator can. And actually now the educator oversees those. But it's to challenge their own learning. They identify their own deficits in their learning and they challenge them by having the appropriate assignment. Problem solving. This shifts the focus from the teacher to the students. It involves authentic problems. It challenges the students to collaborate, come together as team members, and to critically think, to work together. What is it that we are learning here? You know, taking from component to component. Now, the critics of andragogy, we always have to look at the other side, and the theory has been criticized by Hatry. Hatry stated, did Knowles present a theory of learning or is it of teaching? Not sure if it was just actually a theory or was it just, a way to teach good, the best way to teach. Brookfield states, is this a proven theory? Our professor in class, Dr. Stone, stated there is a relationship between research and theory. He states, quote, "Research is the scientific process through which we predict and explain observations. Theory is the outcome of the process." Unquote. So, you know, we need to have a theory, you need to do the research. But there's nothing wrong with pedagogy. It is a starting point. I mean, we can't use, you know, some of Knowles is in teaching children. However, there are some children that could do very well in using some of these theories that you know, some of these components or the assumptions to their learning, because some kids are very forward. So what is the future of adult learning? At the moment, there is a lot of emphasis placed on theory than practice. So we need to meld the both. Need to meld theory into practice. And nursing tries to do this. You know, there's a lot of nursing theories out there, and just to try and get it to the bedside sometimes is very difficult. If you look into adults as being consumers of education, they are going to say that if there is an expectation that learning will become more directed, then it's going to have to be more adult focused. You know, like the online education, online programs. You know, there has to be a more adult focus, like I've said. More self-directed. Because we are in charge of our own learning. There are lots of theories out there. Behaviorist, humanist, cognitivist, and social cognitivists and constructivists. There's transformational, experiential, reflective. There are some new approaches to learning, holistic, non-Western and feministic perspectives. There's emotional intelligence is a new way of learning. I believe this to be a real good avenue in nursing that we could explore. How is empathy or compassion taught? How do we manage our emotions? What are the tools in which to do that? Thorndike wrote, "Only one thing human is unreservedly good, the power to make it better. This power of learning is the essential principle of reason and the right in the world." Learning, the power of learning. That's just phenomenal. Because there's so much that we can change if only we knew how to do that. And we can do that through learning. Learning other perspective, other ways of knowing. Well, I appreciate you being involved with me today. This has been a presentation just on one aspect of adult learning. And emotional intelligence I spoke to you about, and there is something that I would like to, in some form or other, present that. You know, how do we manage our emotions? So stay tuned. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and thank you again for joining me. I'm Jenny Buffenbarger. Bye.